Students all across the country practice active shooter drills. Some have even had to put them to the test this year. Our 9 News parenting expert and licensed therapist, Dr. Sheryl Ziegler, joins us this morning to discuss how this will impact kids. Thanks for coming in. So talk about what generation this is impacting and how it's impacting them.
Yeah, so we're talking about Gen Z, which is also dubbed a term of generation lockdown. And what that means, those are kids born in the late 90s to the 2010s. And all they've known are lockdown and active shooter drills and secure perimeters and having to stay inside and hiding. And so what that means is when you start off in pre-K, you know, they make it sort of like little playful, like what if a bear ran into our school? Where would we hide? Okay, and so that probably doesn't provoke too much fear in too many kids, but the older they get, the more they realize what's going on. This is a generation filled with fear.
It's something so different than we knew. Like we did earthquake drills when I was like little. Like this was not a thing, and the fact that this is such commonplace for them and so often.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember just fire drills, and you know, it just felt orderly. It was like get in a line and walk outside, and then you got to be outside for like 15 minutes. You know, it wasn't scary at all. And this is, you know, you've got kids hiding and constantly hearing teachers say, how am I going to keep a classroom filled with kindergartners or first graders quiet?
Right.
And so what we have then is once you get to middle school and high school and you really understand the prevalence of this, then you've got kids who are suffering from either desensitization, right? They're sort of like, yep, this is just what happens. Some of them carry around this fear, and they have trauma symptoms. So now when we're talking about high schoolers, we're talking anxiety and depression and re-triggering. So when this elementary school shooting or a latest shooting happens, they all of a sudden relive their experiences. And so we really have to look at what happens to a community when this happens. I mean, it changes the climate. Even if it doesn't happen to your actual school, it still impacts your community and reverberates out. Changes the climate. It changes again, we've been talking about teachers, you know, their willingness to stay or enter into this field. But really on these kids, when we talk about generation lockdown, we have a youth mental health crisis. And certainly this level of fear, I think, is really impacting how they do again later in the teen years.
Yeah, it was so interesting when we saw the East High School students come out last week. You could tell that so many of them were desensitized to this again because they have just gone through it and they go through it so often. Lastly, I do want to ask you about Healthy Kids Colorado did a study asking kids about the access to guns, and the results were shocking.
Shocking. So 1 in 4, I believe it was 1 in 4 of them replied that they can get a gun within 24 hours, but half of them said they could get a gun within 10 minutes.
Loaded gun, right?
A loaded gun within 10 minutes. And so when you have this mentality of, I could get a gun, or you could get a gun, or some stranger could so easily, that impacts everything from violence and also suicide. And so we know that teens are impulsive, and so they know that as well. And so imagine carrying around that fear and just knowing like, oh yeah, and access to a gun, that's no problem, easy. And so that is really, I think, startling and concerning, and we really need to look at what we're doing in terms of guns and what that means for kids.
Absolutely, and we got to talk about safe storage because that is a huge part, clearly, from that study. That's a problem.
Absolutely.
Dr. Ziegler, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.